Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Tariffs. On behalf of the Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce, thank you all for being here. I'm very honored that the individuals behind me chose to join us. So we have Councillor Jason Lum, also representing EMC Canada. And then we have Chris Less from Delta Water Products, Julian Treur from Creekside Cheese and Creamery, and Alan Martens from Tycrop Trailers. And we're going to have a really great conversation around tariffs. We are going to do a Q&A, keeping in mind that please wait for the microphone. We are recording this in case anyone wants to watch it later, or for those that couldn't be here today. So I'll grab the mic, and then that way your question will be recorded and we'll be able to capture it on camera. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Stalo people, Stalo meaning people of the river. And we're very honored to be able to have this conversation here today on the lands, and we are very grateful for the relationships we hold with our Indigenous neighbours. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Leanna. Do I need this? Can I just put it down here? Oh, I need this one? You need that. All right, perfect. Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your day. It's funny, let's talk tariffs. It makes it sound so nice. Let's talk tariffs. But unfortunately, I'll preface this all by saying what is true now while we're in this room may not be true the time we leave. And that may not be true at the end of the day when we all go home. So we really don't know. And it's part of that uncertainty that we've gathered here today to gather some industry leaders to have this conversation. Any of you know me know that I'm pretty conversational guy. So it's not going to be too formal here. We're going to try and ask a few questions of our panelists, find out how these tariffs are showing up in their industries, how they've been dealing with them, and any insight they can offer, and then just have the opportunity to open up to you, to the floor, and find out some of the same things, how they're showing up in your respective businesses. And hopefully, I said this to Alan yesterday, if anything, we'll share a bit of the misery here together, and we'll also maybe come out of this with some resources or some opportunities that we can have some further discussion. And I think that's one of the really important ways that the Chamber of Commerce here in Chilliwack is showing up for small and medium-sized businesses, is you have these opportunities to hold this space, to have these conversations together. So just want to thank Tim and everybody here at Cowork Chilliwack for this beautiful venue. This is being recorded, so as Leanna said, if you have a question, we'll bring a mic around, and so we'll make sure we gather that on video. I think we're not streaming it, but we're going to keep the video, and the Chamber will be able to have that for future. So let's start. And maybe I'll start with you, Alan. How are these tariffs showing up in your day-to-day operations? So, and it could be whether pricing, customer relationships, sourcing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. How is it showing up? It's tough out there. We're a manufacturer, and some of our products still falls under CUSMA. So, for about 30 days there, we were affected, but we're moving product again. But 50% of our revenue goes to the United States, and so. The stuff that we're building for that does fall under the steel and aluminum tariff, 25%. And so our customers are saying they don't want to pay it, and we're telling our customers we don't want to pay it. So then the standoff starts. So that affects us in a real way every day. Yeah.
And it's something that I've been hearing a lot from some of the companies that we're talking to at EMC is, some of them who they've had long-standing customer relationships and they don't want to put those in jeopardy. They're choosing to eat some of those additional costs, but that in itself is not sustainable. So there was another customer I just had a conversation with the other day, and they were eating $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 per truck that was rolling into their business. So what about you, Julian?
So for the dairy industry, we're a little bit insulated from this just because we have the supply management system. So we don't export a lot. And of course, any dairy imports that come into Canada from the States are still under CUSMA, and there's a lot of free trade that still happens with that free trade agreement. In fact, the U.S. doesn't even use up all of their allotment of the milk that comes into Canada for that. So from the production standpoint, we're not really seeing any issues yet, although there's been rumblings, of course, south of the border, which something may or may not come from that. It's more that I think we're going to see things when we're having to buy equipment, say tractors or irrigation equipment or even milking parlor supplies, things like that. We don't know how many of those items fall under CUSMA. We'll have to wait to hear that from our suppliers, but we fully expect to see price increases on that side of things, which in turn will affect the price of milk that ends up being that the customers have to pay in the long run. Conversely, on the creamery side of things, so we process some of our milk on the farm and then sell that directly to the customer. We're actually seeing a market increase in customers coming out to the farm because they're not trying to source Canadian or local products. So on that side of things, we definitely can't complain for this whole Buy Canadian movement, but long term, the effects remain to be seen.
And that's a good segue to Chris. What are you seeing in your organization?
Sure. So, and we're a distributor with supply chains that really branch out all over the world. So there's lots of moving parts and tentacles to that. I would say that the immediate impact, it really haven't felt too much in the very short term. But we all acknowledge and realize that that's coming. It's not just the tariff war, if you want to call it, between Canada and the U.S. that I think is the issue. It's the global market, and specifically for a lot of our manufacturers, it's the U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports into the U.S., which is having fairly immediate price impacts on items that we might buy from U.S. manufacturers coming up into Canada. So I would say the immediate impact, we're generally importing more from the U.S. or other countries around the world rather than selling across the line. Obviously, this hurts exporters like Alan much more directly right up front. But I think the tentacles to this run really deep, and it's going to be a bit more of a wild ride ahead as these start to trickle through the economy as a whole. For sure.
Right. Alan, with you, so part of the whole substantiation behind this in the U.S. was to reshore manufacturing down into the U.S. operations. You guys have had some operations down there, or you have partnerships down there.
Yep.
Are you aware of other companies that are actively looking to move to the U.S.? Is this a real risk for Canadian manufacturers that you're seeing?
There's talk of it. However, I think what any business is looking for, whether they're in Canada or in the U.S., is clarity and sustainability, or just black and white. Because if we're going to tariff, we'll plan around that, and if we're not going to tariff, we'll plan around that. And I think the problem is that the tariffs have been on and off. So anyone that's even thinking of moving to the States, would view that as a mistake if in 30 days, 90 days, the tariffs came off. So I think the general industry, both north and south of the border, is people just want clarity of what is going to happen so people can then set the planning process in place to deal with it.
Right. And Chris, we had this conversation yesterday a little bit about what are some of those unintended consequences in the supply chain. There's obviously some of the products that you distribute, they're made in the U.S. There are things that your customers up here have grown very accustomed to using. They're comfortable using that technology. What are some of these unintended consequences that you're seeing start to pop up?
Sure. I think there's, a lot of American-made goods are, frankly, top-quality brands and products in the marketplace. We may or may not recognize, that they're necessarily American or have that extra quality. But when you start to talk, in many cases, about, hey, we'll pivot and buy from Asia, for example. Well, I think Asian supply chains in general have come a long ways in quality. There is in many instances or segments, a marked kind of depreciation in the quality there. So I think probably the Canadian consumer isn't really wanting or looking to trade down in quality oftentimes, and the disruption in the supply chain is absolutely making people make choices like that fairly quickly.
Are you seeing people, Chris, hold off on some of their purchasing decisions right now?
Yeah, that's again. Do you attribute that to uncertainty? Is it broader economic slowdown? Really, is it? It could be a number of things, but absolutely. The uncertainty of where my end market may end up as a result of tariffs, whether your market's in the U.S. or global. I think there is a bit of a reticence to spend on capital expenditures across a lot of industries right now. So I think we'll start to see that impact pretty quickly.
And Julian, you hinted at this a little bit about especially farmers who are, again, purchasing big capital equipment up here. And that's more, I guess, related to the any reciprocal tariffs that would be levied. And in terms of what the impact that's having on potentially the ag industry and farmers. I mean, this is a time of year equipment's getting pulled out, and they're starting to use it, and or it's starting to break down, and you're having to replace it. So you're starting to hear that coming from the industry?
Yeah, definitely hearing that throughout the industry. So personally, we're really thankful. Last year, we put in an irrigation pivot, so we don't have any big expenditures coming up this year, as far as we can tell, unless we have a major breakdown of anything. But there's been an increased demand for milk. So producers have been asked to produce more milk in the last few months, which is encouraging some farmers to look at building new barns, new infrastructure on their farms. Now, again, a lot of that equipment comes from the U.S. currently, some of it from Europe, but the majority of it would come from the U.S. And if there's reciprocal tariffs on that equipment, these farmers are going to have to look twice at what they're going to do long term, if that's going to be holding off on the build, waiting to see what happens. And like we've all alluded to, it's a lot of wait and see right now, because really by the end of this meeting or tomorrow or next week, everything could change again. So I think what I'm hearing from friends in the industry is everybody's just holding off and let's just focus on getting our first crops in, knock on wood that nothing breaks down, and try to get through the next few months until we really figure out what's going on.
Julian, one of the things I really appreciate about you is you have a blog that you write, and you kind of give us a bit of insight into what it looks like day to day running a farming operation, and you talked a little bit about this potentially opening up a new market or new market opportunities for farmers. Are you hearing that more? Is there something like we could be doing more to plug some of that locally grown, locally made, farm to table kind of stuff?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that for farmers or different retail outlets that really support the local movement. They are definitely leaning heavily into that, putting themselves out there as a supplier of local food, Canadian products, and things like that. And I think that's definitely, we're seeing a definite uptick in sales because of that. If that's going to be long term, or if that's just all a part of the Woo Canada movement, is hard to know. But for us, that there is that positive side of things that we are quite thankful for in today's day and age, for sure.
And are you hearing, is there capacity to increase right now? Is there generally that capacity there?
I think so, for the most part. For us, we'd be looking at expanding fairly soon if this increase in demand keeps going. But then, of course, what's the cost going to be for that? So again, you're running into that what if and what's going to happen, and why can't we, we would really like to be able to plan for this kind of thing.
Yeah. I mentioned it a little bit too, where, it was a kind of a wide variation of how people are dealing with these right now. Are you, I guess, Al, are you seeing a lot of businesses absorbing those costs right now? Are they passing it on? Too early to say? And I'll maybe go one by one and see.
Yeah, I think for what we're seeing in our industry is kind of a smattering, which is some people are volunteering to just take on the tariff themselves. Sounds unsustainable. Some people are refusing to take the tariff, pass it on to their customer, and some people are choosing to split it right down the middle.
Yeah. And Julian?
We haven't noticed it on our farm yet because we haven't had to make any significant purchases. But I was talking to a fellow farmer, a greenhouse operation. He was saying that the greenhouse farmers that buy their like small plants or cuttings from the U.S., they're really, really uncertain about what's going to happen with that, and they don't have the infrastructure or the capacity or the equipment to even to plant or to propagate those items up here. So it's in the short term, even in the next few months, we might start to see supply issues with that on the Canadian side of things.
And Chris, your sales guys, is this driving them nuts here? Are they holding quotes for 30 days? Are they having to put caveats on the bottom?
So yeah, certainly a bunch of preparation in that regard because generally it is uncertain. Again, as an importer, we're having these conversations with our manufacturing partners in the U.S. and around the world, but what that looks like. So I would say there's varying levels of cooperation. I met with a manufacturer last week at an industry event who's, they about 20% of their sales are Canadian. They're an American manufacturer. And they're basically kissing the Canadian market goodbye because they're not CUSMA compliant, and they're just saying, look, it's not worth it for us in the short term to pursue that. Maybe that's up to the individual manufacturer, but so yeah, just a variety of approaches to it. I think the smart ones have taken more of a wait and see approach, and let's bridge until we have some certainty. But when are we going to have that certainty is the big question.
And as a as a distributor looking at your supply chain and where you're purchasing from, does that in turn open up maybe opportunities for domestic for a domestic supply chain for another supplier to step in and fill that gap? I don't know if it might be a little early in that. I know those are conversations we're having. What capability and capacity do we have up here in our manufacturing sector to fill those gaps? But
sorry, question to me.
Yeah, I'm guessing, do you see, and I'll use this kind of as a segue into the next thing about how are we gathering some of this information so we could even make that available for suppliers that are up here that want to step in?
I think, the Canadian marketplace or manufacturing base is going to be able to support different industries or sectors better than others. It's not been where we've turned immediately to diversify the supply chain because we do have diverse, opportunities around the world. So generally it's Europe, generally it's China, and hopefully not because, our American partners, frankly, are some of the best, and we want to continue to work with them.
Yeah. We also talked about this kind of in a conversation. So, and I'll start with you, Alan. Is your business? Are you getting, or your sector? I'll leave it open to that. Are you getting the support and the resources, the trade intelligence to help navigate some of this cross-border stuff, or are you just mostly figuring it out on your own?
Well, I can tell you that nobody knows. So we do what we can. We use our broker a lot. They don't know. Is this tariff code that? Is this tariff code that? We don't think it is. Well, we think it is. So right down to trying to push product across the border. The U.S. border people, they don't understand either, so they'll refuse it. Redo your paperwork. One thing we haven't talked about, so we've sent some things across that we have tariff, or we have received tariffs. The administration burden on your business for the background paperwork for mill certs and country of origin for all the parts that you supply is unbelievable, unsustainable. And but anyways, I would say because nobody actually knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
Nobody can invest the days, weeks, or months to actually come up with a plan because it could change tomorrow.
Right.
So I think people want to help, but nobody knows what to do.
Right. And you do know what is certain is you're absorbing those operational costs
100%.
Today.
Yes,
Yeah.
which of course means prices are going up for everybody.
Yeah. Julian, what do you?
Our regional and national dairy organizations have been very good about putting out news briefs, letters to producers as news becomes available. But again, it's all so uncertain. It's changing all the time. So we're getting multiple emails a day sometimes as things change. And they try to predict what it would mean for our industry or on boots on the farm sort of level, but it's so hard to know. Again, speaking to that uncertainty, we just don't know.
One thing that I really appreciated from some of the dairy associations is just trying to lay to rest the misinformation that's coming up about, especially from the U.S., talking about how unfair and horrible the Canadian farmers and Canadian dairy are, and the government is when it comes to dairy. And I think you hinted a little bit at it around. I don't think the export market from the U.S. has ever hit those thresholds where those stepped up tariffs would. Do you want to take a crack at a bit of that, just so for people that want to
talk a little bit about that? Sure. So it's always whenever trade things come up, supply management always is the whipping post. It seems like they always come out with knives out for that, because it's an industry that is protected with a tariff wall. So supply management has three pillars, which is the price that's paid to the farmers, which is based on the cost of production. It's a tariff wall to protect the Canadian industry from imports, and then it's also production controls within the country to match the amount that Canadians need with what the farmers are producing. So in recent trade deals, or in trade deals over the last decades, it seems like every time a trade deal is signed, a little bit more tariff-free access to the Canadian dairy market is granted. And with the CUSMA agreement, it was the same thing. They got a certain percentage that they could import into Canada tariff-free. Now, it's been 5 years since CUSMA was implemented. They still have not, in any of those years, reached that cap. Right around 50% is what they're importing right now. So, yes, there is a tariff wall. Has it ever been reached by the U.S.? No, they don't. They've never felt that tariff wall. So it gets frustrating as a farmer, as an industry, to see that brought up time and time again when it's actually a non-issue.
Yeah. And Chris, internal resources, external,
so
combination.
I just think, the one of the reasons behind this meeting today was to try to give, I think smaller businesses a bit more of a sense of what others are doing, to respond to this. And it was actually, as we were talking through this, talking to Al, and I know that obviously the impact is big there. It's somewhat comforting, if you want to put it that way, to realize that nobody knows what the heck really to do, and that there is no right answer. And even in the grand scale, so I mentioned last week talking to several of our key vendors at an industry event. Even the very large businesses and importers or manufacturers that we work with, they don't know what's going on or how to do it. They have more internal resources to scenario plan. So I talked to one business that really had 8 different scenario plans based on, if this happens, then we're doing this, and we're shifting production here, and we're gonna try to change this supply chain here, and hundreds and hundreds of hours of planning on their part into something that may or may not happen, and frankly has been moved all over the board in terms of their response to it. We don't internally have those resources. We're trying to be prudent. I think there's, to this point, the wait and see approach really probably is won the day. But I think there's a short-term and long-term component to that. You can stock up on inventory if you're bringing inventory across the line. That only holds you for a certain amount of time. Long term, I think there's larger decisions to be made in terms of, if they do stick, what does that do to your ultimate supply chain?
It's incredible to think that we're just at the end of Q1 here, and tariffs weren't even necessarily priced into the market in terms of what was going on in the economy. So, certainly the huge swing. Not that just the stock market is necessarily a valid indicator of all of this, but it's certainly been interesting to watch how this is moved. And again, some of the conversations that we've been having from the Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium about, we had a variety of manufacturers who pre-tariffs who had a large U.S. market or large U.S. Customers were pumping as many orders into the U.S. market as they possibly could. In fact, they were putting Canadian orders on hold and just going 24/7 to get everything out the door pre-tariff. Now they're backfilling their Canadian ones again. So all of the talk, and we've seen, a lot of conversation both from provincially and federally about what this does in terms of job losses and the incredible damage long term that this could do to the economy if they stick. It hasn't yet quite been baked into what we're seeing. We're starting to see certainly the conversations we're having is, I'd rather them just get it done with, like put a tariff on and leave it so we can at least adapt around that. I guess in terms of going forward, especially on the remission side, on the reciprocal side, because that's something that there's been lots of conversation. Are you guys feeling like you have an avenue to provide feedback into that? I mean, if you had an opportunity, do you have some thoughts on reciprocal tariffs and how that might affect your business and unintended consequences maybe there? Maybe Chris, do you want to take a crack?
I think it's been quite comical actually. Not everybody thinks they have an avenue into the right people at government that'll maybe exempt their industry or their specific segment from counter tariffs. So we've actually been asked to write letters to a couple of our American suppliers to help them lobby the Congress or the president or whoever in terms of, hey, please exempt our industry from tariffs because we're special, and maybe it's food security or maybe it's national security or something like that. And obviously none of those, I mean, unless there's a concerted lobby around the auto industry, which we see and hear even in the headlines yesterday and today, maybe there's some of that getting through. But I don't think, I don't see currently an avenue to really influence what's happening either on a counter tariff and or certainly, for some of our American suppliers to the U.S. government. I think these are certainly not being made through any kind of consultation, and I'm not sure there is a central voice to really impact anything at this point.
Julian, what do you think?
I know that Dairy Farmers of Canada, of course, is having the conversations they usually have with elected officials. Of course, with Parliament not sitting right now, an election underway, everything's a little complicated on that side of things too. And of course, for dairy, it's a little bit different too, because we would see counter tariffs on many different aspects of our business, but not anything that's really specific to dairy. So it's going to be equipment, it's going to be tractors, it's going to be feed, things like that. So it's nothing really specific that they could lobby for. Let's just exempt this because it's for food security. It would be very broad. So I don't know how effective any lobbying would be at this point for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Alan?
Counter tariffs, well, prices going up again.
Yeah.
So we manufacture trailers, but if it's trailers, tractors, cars, trucks, the North American supply chain is a very complex and decades-old relationships. And, a car might have a part cross the border 7 times. Yeah. And you can imagine the tariffs going back and forth. But, back to touch on what we're doing, so we're up here saying, we don't know what to do, but we can always do something. Right. So, in terms of know your market. So, for instance, we sell into the United States. So, they don't want to pay the tariff, but our message to them is whether you pay the tariff or you burden the United States with all the manufacturing for North America, your price is going to go up.
Right.
So, it's going to go up. Review your terms and conditions if you need to have a tariff line in there to protect yourself. So, de-risk yourself. Audit your supply chain. Work with your suppliers to go, what are you doing to help with the tariffs? Back to the administration burden on businesses to produce the paper trail of where all this stuff comes from. So sometimes we have to rely on our supply chain to do that. And also review how you're packaging stuff. If you package it this way, does it qualify for a different tariff code if you send it separately? So there are things you can do to mitigate your risks throughout it. But yeah, on a big scale, we don't really know what to do, but on a small scale, there's lots of things that we can do.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Is one of those things actively looking at diversification? Are you looking at diversifying your marketplace and looking at new markets potentially?
Yeah, for sure. Like, so for our business, we are very much a design and manufacturing business. So it's not like we make a commodity. So it's not like turn off the United States and just start selling to Canada.
Right.
These relationships that we've had are years and years old, and we've worked with them to design a certain product to get it to a certain quality level. And just to turn that off and just say we'll sell that to a Canadian, it doesn't work that way. We have to develop those relationships and those products with Canadians.
Do you guys get affected by, and I'll ask each one of you this, any of the interprovincial trade restrictions?
For the equipment we build, only such that, as some of our trailers cross provincial boundaries, weights and dimensions and that sort of thing. But, we just build to whatever province it's going to.
Okay. And there are opportunities there to standardize in between. That's actually one that I've heard, around weights. And
yeah, well, if you talk to a politician, they're making it out like it's a big game changer,
right.
world changing,
Really.
but it's not really, no.
I talk to a few politicians sometimes. Julian, what do you think?
Interprovincial trade barriers for supplies doesn't seem to be an issue. It never has really been an issue for dairy. Never really noticed it anyways. Never heard of anything of that. But conversely, on the production side, we're a provincially certified milk plant, so we cannot ship out of province. You need to be a federally licensed plant to do that. But maybe there's a conversation to be had about allowing provincially certified plants to ship out of province and expand the customer base that way. I don't know.
Yeah, that was one that came up too, is looking at one standard, pick the best, doesn't matter, pick the best and hold that to the standard.
Usually they're very similar anyways.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And what about diversification? Are you still looking at opening up new markets? Is that something that a small to medium sized business would have?
I think so, maybe out of province again. If the interprovincial trade barriers have been an issue, and if those would be demolished, maybe that would help some small and medium enterprises for sure. For us, it's definitely on the horizon for us. Yeah.
Okay. Going to start selling into Europe, competing with the Swiss
within
cheese
Canada.
makers. Oh, you've got a good product. It's a very good product. Chris?
Yeah, so I think on a macro level, the counter tariff piece, of course, and just to echo Alan, I mean, I think on a philosophical level, it is just an additional tax on Canadians. So we feel we want to, retaliate somehow. Maybe that's not the smartest move, but I'll leave that for the politicians. In terms of the interprovincial movement of goods, absolutely, I think that's something that our government should be tackling, and a lot. There's some lip service paid to it a couple of months ago, but I don't know that anything's been done. Specifically the food industry in Canada, and which I used to be a part of. I mean, the rules around what you can move across provincial lines are just a joke, really. I mean, there's no, and oftentimes it's easier to import out of the U.S. than it is to move it across Canadian provincial lines. So, in terms of concrete action on specific industries, I think the interprovincial trade barriers are actually significant, and fixing that and using this opportunity to fix that would be fairly. Don't get me wrong, everybody's got their little reason why these rules came into being or currently exist, but I think it's high time we move past that, and this is the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. One could say there's a level of hypocrisy, maybe, if you're anti-protectionist rhetoric, but then not willing to look at some of the rules that are out there. And like you said, some of them, maybe predate a lot of the people that are in power right now, but it's often convenient times. Just if it was there, just leave it. And don't talk, but maybe this has given some of the onus and the motivation to look at them. We'll see. It does seem to be one that's kind of bubbling to the top a little bit. We'll see if it gets legs. I know, in terms of resources, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has a tariff navigator. There's been a couple of trade missions that have gone down to the U.S. I know just the chambers of commerce and trade associations that have come out and are doing some advocacy work right now the Canadian-U.S. Chamber of Commerce is often a fairly good resource in terms of trying to get information out as up to date as they possibly can. Again, the caveat is that things change oftentimes multiple times and very quickly. But certainly from our perspective and from the Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium and the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, there are sector-specific resources that are out there. Looking at opportunities in the supply chain, looking at what it looks like to reshore and look at our domestic supply chain, our domestic manufacturing capacity, our food processing capacity. And so having a good connection in with folks that are living it every day, I think, is actually part of the missing link. Is people like me, the politicians, probably don't ask the people doing the actual work enough questions. Which brings us to, I think, an opportunity to open this up. And if you have a question or comment for the panel, now would be your opportunity. Leanna's got a microphone, so if you do, just raise your hand and we'll take some questions. Quiet bunch.
Somebody's got to start.
Oh.
So this issue of the counter tariffs that Canada has imposed on the states, Canada's economy is roughly 10% of the American economy. And so while I certainly understand the instinct of, let's hit back, purely, from a non-political but from an economic perspective, are the counter tariffs that we've imposed on American product coming in really the wisest thing to do? Why would we double down on self-harm sort of thing? So, it'd be interesting to see what it looks like a month from now when the election's all said and done. But I really wonder whether, the current setup where, we've given into the impulse to smack back is really the smartest thing to do.
Yeah. You want to, Chris? Yeah.
I think the big thing there is there's a lag on the impact of these counter tariffs and where they apply. And the Canadian general public to this point, I don't think has felt it. So when that economic impact comes through, like where's to point the finger at that point? I mean, like you said, it is self-inflicted to a certain extent for sure.
One of the things that I think is interesting about that whole conversation is that I have never seen an exhaustive list of everything that we have imposed counter tariffs on. So yeah, we were looking, but I heard some conversation on it, and you heard the Florida orange juice, but then there was these really, you heard Kentucky bourbon, but then it was like powdered wigs made in some place. It seemed like a bunch of Civil War paraphernalia or something like that. It was like, who buys that stuff up here? So yeah, I'm not sure it was really having that big impact, but I mean, obviously counter tariffs on steel, aluminum, auto, like those ones.
That's the stuff you can find information about.
That's right. Yeah. But there's this other X amount or X billion dollars.
It doesn't seem to be too much rhyme or reason on that. We buy some expansion tanks from the U.S. and the steel tanks were not included in the counter tariffs, and the composite tanks were.
Interesting. So, and I know there was some conversation. Yeah, there was some conversation about stuff that wasn't readily available. And in some of those remission applications, I know there was discussion on the federal side, on the Canadians' side. We had to give, they wanted to give good kind of headway so people could adjust accordingly and they could find something that was readily available domestically or otherwise to purchase. But again, I wouldn't even know what that was. Al, you have any comments on that one?
Well, we've certainly had a lot of talk about tariffs in the last few months, but I think something that people maybe forget or don't realize is tariffs have always been in place, and there's lots of tariffs in place. And so for us, we build equipment, so steel and aluminum is important to us. North America doesn't make enough aluminum or steel to support the production levels that we need. So that's why we import from places offshore. Canada already has a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum from offshore. We put that in the fall. So if that were to come off, that would help a business like myself be more competitive to go up against the tariffs in the States. And to Chris's point, I don't understand the list of the counter tariffs, and it's just driving prices up again. So, and we're starting to see price increases, and then inevitably what happens is you get the COVID effect, which is some of the price increases we're getting, I don't think they're tariffs.
Right.
They're just, everybody's raising their price.
Yeah, it's a convenient kind of smokescreen there a little bit. To
For sure.
Yeah.
And if we sell a piece of equipment into the United States for $100,000 US, and then we put a tariff on it, that US supplier of that same equipment is now going to raise their price because that's the new market.
Right. That's
Exactly. So
now,
it's just, it just pushes everything up.
Yeah. And to your point on the steel and aluminum side, it's interesting. I was in Quebec a number of weeks ago, and Quebec, another big aluminum producing province, British Columbia and Quebec, and they were saying, we can produce a lot of aluminum. We could ramp up our capacity much quicker than anybody's going to build aluminum smelters in the U.S. So we could do that here. However, we don't have the same extrusion capacity as they do in Chicago or across the line. So we're going to produce it all, and we're going to send it across the line. So maybe there are some specific things that we should look at from a capacity standpoint that we could be investing in up here that would help, increase our competitiveness and opportunity. Other questions?
Just wondering about your...
we'll get you a mic there, Brad. Yeah. Just so you show up on the video. We don't want to miss
great,
you.
Thanks.
Right? Yeah.
Just wondering what it's doing to staffing levels and employment. I have know people that are adding on lots of staff to get product out the door quickly. Some are holding back. Some are doing layoffs. So just wanted to get opinion on staffing levels.
Yeah. Maybe Julian, and then...
We're looking at hiring just because of that influx of new customers looking to buy Canadian. So we need part-term staff for the summer for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I think it varies, and it's probably a short-term and long-term component. Short-term, I would say the uncertainty is causing hesitance in the market, our customers, and therefore, certainly not an impulse to hire. But based on some of the scenarios that we could see playing out, there could be an increased demand for not only on our customer end, but to maybe reshore some of what we're currently buying in. But really, that's a long-term play. It would take a long time to work that through.
Yeah. Alan?
Yeah, a bit opposite for us because we're exporting. If we can't come to terms with our customers and the tariffs implied, we have to take a look at our staffing levels and make sure they're appropriate.
Yeah. What are you seeing, Brad?
Yeah, just a mix of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Temporary stuff? Are you getting short-term temporary hires?
Time, but there's a lot of companies that are also just holding off, get ready into the mid-level management, and then certainly the online staff as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was another one.
Yeah, right here. I think one of the things that we can do is we're heading into an election, federal, but I've heard the panel talk, and I appreciate the bureaucratic red tape is out of control. And so, as we all head to the polls and encourage our family and friends, not just on housing or anything else, but cutting bureaucratic red tape. I work within the dairy industry, supply, and we export and import. And we've added one body just to the paperwork process. Now, it's not full-time, so do the math. That's we had 2, now we've got 3. So we've added 50% just to handle the paperwork. And we're never sure whether we're going to be successful till we get to the border with the product or get the product back. So I think, when we're looking to our elected officials, they've actually got to start getting some traction or legs, as I've heard it said, on cutting red tape, interprovincial and even within our own country. And I think perhaps one of the biggest casualties of this whole thing is going to be broken trust or whatever going forward. I think we're going to be in a real dynamic. Whether tariffs come off completely, in 6 months, we're still now questioning some of those long-term relationships. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, obviously there's lots of commentary about we should have seen some of this coming, or at least hints of this coming. And we are so trade reliant upon the U.S., but it's not just that trade reliant. They're a huge market right on our doorstep. We speak the same language, share a lot of the same customs. They're an easy customer to have. So and far closer from a from a supply chain perspective, it makes all sorts of sense. However, I think you are correct that you're going to see, perhaps people looking at their own internal operations and saying, should a shock like this come again, how are we protected a little bit in terms of diversifying where we're doing business and where we're seeking out new customers. But yeah, any other maybe comments on that red tape? And besides a buzzword, what would be helpful is what are some of those specific things that we could cut that you could take out reasonably, and that would help in a marked way for your operation.
Well, for us as a manufacturer, I mean, we fall under a lot of Transport Canada rules and regulations and compliance, and it's pretty burdensome. But to this gentleman's point about the tariffs and the cross-border, I'm just going to reiterate again the administrative burden on the business to provide the paperwork to send one widget across the border. And if you're sending hundreds and thousands of these things, you got to hire more staff, and that gets passed on. Now, I don't know that our government can do anything about that as we're entering the States, but that is certainly something that is an issue.
Right. Any other comments on the red tape overregulation side?
Again, the provincial trade barriers with the transportation of food across boundaries. I'm sure that can be simplified in many ways.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I'd say that the majority of the red tape, specifically with regards to tariffs in our business, has not currently been felt internally, other than the constant scenario planning and what if and looking at options across the boards. But I'm an advocate for reducing red tape all the time. In me, I think it's in many cases not just tariff or trade related. It's really unacceptable and really holding business under the thumb.
Yeah, speaking to that, actually, we do 4 different food safety audits every year for different suppliers. If even something like that could be streamlined, it could result in much lower prices to consumers, because the amount of man hours that those take are ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. And it's something that, again, speaking from a little bit of experience, it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? It creeps in and then stays. Yeah. So it's not like if you want to introduce 10 new regulations, you have to remove 10 regulations. There should be some kind of rule. If you're contemplating additional ones, you have to look at the ones that maybe
consolidate
aren't working.
them.
Or consolidate, streamline them. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah, other comments, feedback, questions? How are we doing for time, Leanna? Lots of time. Oh, God.
Just to go on, you had taken that conversation a little bit more to, hey, how do you look at diversifying your supply chain, or what kind of options could you have? I think, again, for the small businesses in our community who may only have a real handful or maybe just one option in terms of where their goods are coming from, if you're talking importing or really on a exporting level, I guess it would be the same. Although more difficult than exporters, I think, in general. We've tried to just diversify or look at options across our business as much as possible. And I would say, further to your point earlier, including Canadian manufacturers or suppliers, it really, that's hit or miss, though, in terms of whether there is good quality Canadian products available. I think we'll see a push to support those Canadian manufacturers more, but those options don't always exist in certain industries, at least in a way that matches the need on the Canadian domestic market either.
That's one of the conversations, again, that I've heard quite a bit right now, is that you talk to the sector and they say, yeah, we do it. We have the capability. Like, we've got advanced machining capability, and we're investing more and more into it. And but they kind of fly under the radar. They've been making that one or two widgets. They're tooled up and ready to make those one or two widgets, and they've been doing really well just selling those widgets. So they've never had to think internally about pivoting and changing. Now there might be that perfect storm of, okay, yes, there's some interest from the looking at the supplier side and what's out there in terms of capacity and capability, but there's nothing out there right now that's making it readily available for those large procurement folks that are saying, like, okay, we would buy, like, yes, we've got the aluminum right up here at Alcan or whatever, but we need extrusion capability. Oh, we've got extrusion capability here in Langley or Abbotsford, or they're contemplating investing in that as well. So it's like an opportunity to connect the marketplace in that way, and to connect almost a peer-to-peer manufacturers. There's been a lot of talk about that, but nobody's quite figured out how to square that circle yet.
What if it's just the timeline of things too?
And it is, and it's fast. And by the time you've invested, and this is a long term. Like I think Chris has said it, and you've all said it, hinted at it. There's this kind of gut punch, like let's react. We have to react now. We have to do it for all these reasons. But structurally, these things have been in place for decades and decades. And so if we want to do this in a meaningful way, in a thoughtful way, it's got to be more than let's just stop drinking that Florida orange juice or whatever.
I think the example might be, water pumps, which is a significant part of what we do. For example, there's not many large-scale Canadian manufacturers of pumps in any way, shape, or form, at least that I'm aware of or have come across. So at the same time, we do see a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. I say it's more minor in our markets out west than I understand is actually happening in Ontario, where the established American brands are certainly having a bit of a backlash against them. So, right. But the alternative being presented, or the alternative currently that we and other distributors are exploring, is not, okay, where can I find this pump in Canada? Because I don't know that it exists, or at least with the capacity to cover the Canadian market. But it's where else in the world can we find
right.
A similar quality for a similar price? Just one other piece on that is maybe some of the weight that could be thrown from government behind this is the Buy Canadian option.
Right.
I think, frankly, in a lot of cases that would be inflationary, but supportive of the of Canadian manufacturing where that exists.
Well, and there's supposed to be, the counter tariff is supposed to be, invested back into providing relief for these businesses. We'll see where that goes, but I think there is perhaps an opportunity, especially to get the big purchasers, the big distributors, identifying at the very least, here's our needs, and here's what we'd be willing to look at if it met or exceeded the quality and standards that we're used to and that our customers are used to. So what is out there? Like I mean, it's more than just rhetoric, but I believe in my heart of hearts that we should and could be doing this stuff up here, providing good Canadian jobs for Canadians who want to do this stuff. The fact of the matter is like, from an investment standpoint, we've been lacking. We have not been investing in our sector. It's been too easy and too cheap to have it built and done somewhere else, right? So we haven't been making those strategic investments. We haven't been making investments in advanced manufacturing the way that other countries around the world have. The Netherlands, you look at other places that have, that have made these investments. They've increased their productivity. They've upskilled workers. They've done all the things that we talk a lot about, but maybe don't invest in. If you were going to invest counter-tariff money into that, I would be throwing my hand up pretty quickly to say we should be looking at our advanced manufacturing capability. We should be looking at how we can upskill, reskill, support workers that way. I don't know. What thoughts, Al?
I agree, but the problem is we're going to run into red tape. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Let's take the aluminum example. We send our raw aluminum down to the States, and they either flat roll it or produce extrusions. For us to bring that up here, put the infrastructure in place, get building permits in place, get it past some environmental study, do all these things. It is years and years away. So that's where the real red tape is, I personally believe, is the ability to build infrastructure in our country.
Well, now you just hit on something that, I can say that, the level of government that I work for actually has a huge hand in on that zoning, on that planning, on the building permit, development permit side. And no, I'm glad you mentioned it. You couple that with the cost of land up here, right?
Yeah.
And, again, it's a conversation I had a couple days ago. Idaho Falls, they're giving away land right now. So you want to come down there, we'll give away land. You come down. We're prevented from doing that. It's just a business up here. But there are a lot of other ways we can try and make your life easier. If we truly believe, like all of us truly believe we want to do this, then it's got to be full court press on every level of government. Yeah.
I think if there's a reinvestment of counter tariff money in Canada, let's hope there's common sense enough to make sure that that's in the form of tax credits or on capital expenditures, for example, for existing business, and not just huge gobs of government money thrown at, EV battery plants, for example, that really have no, at least the evidence is in recent weeks, no real benefit in terms of the amount spent on them from the government in the first place. So I think there's if you create the environment for increased Canadian manufacturing and reward the people that are willing to put their own capital at risk to do so, I think there's probably a lot of good that can come out of it. But there's a lot of ways to reinvest that money back into the economy.
Yeah, without fail. That's something that's common. Like if it was a smoother ride and you could guarantee, bring that level of certainty to us, we will make that investment. Oftentimes, some of those investments are tied directly to things that maybe they're not. It's maybe I would say maybe the wrong metric. So I want to invest in that capital equipment or that advanced manufacturing capability, but it has to be directly tied to creating more jobs. Not the type of job, but just more jobs, just as many jobs as you can get, right? Well, the thing is that, and you look around, any example in any country that is investing in those, it might not necessarily be the metric that you're tracking. Yes, we want to have more jobs and more opportunities, but we want to have a highly skilled workforce as well and opportunities to do things. And that's something. We're going to face massive retirement, especially in the manufacturing sector. Massive amount of retirement. So there's going to be a huge need for jobs and the need to attract a new generation of workers to that sector specifically. If we do believe in a country that has capability and capacity to build things again. And I don't know that we're getting there. You tried to hire some millwrights lately? It's tough. It's tough for sure. So yeah, it's a good, that skill, the skill set and skilled trades and skilled work is something that we're going to need to work on as well.
My oldest is graduating this year from high school. He's in the Red Seal program for auto mechanic. But we had two of my husband's childhood friends from the Netherlands visit us for a week, and they have kids the same age who are already very specialized in their trades. The education system is so advanced in the Netherlands compared to here. If people are going into trades, that I can see it being such a benefit for different types of trades, machining and mechanics and manufacturing, if there was more of a push earlier on for these kids to pursue these trades. My kid hates school because he's doing stuff there he doesn't want to do. Yeah. If he was doing stuff he was interested in, he would be happier. We'd be happier, and we'd be building our workforce much earlier and much stronger, I think.
That's something that comes up again, that discussion. You're trying to catch people when they're, young folks, they're 15 or something, and then starting to talk to them about, have you considered opportunities to work in this sector? And by that point, it's too enticing to become a YouTube star or a TikTok influencer, and you don't think about that, or you think about this stuff as it's kind of, we've had these problems with stigma around agriculture as well. This is dirty. It's not. Manufacturing is dirty, hard work, and it's not going to do it. And the fact of the matter is, it's got to be K-12. It's got to be early. It's got to be talking about and we do. It's incredible because we talk about science, technology, engineering, and math. Great buzz. Everybody talks about it. I mean, in effect, that's what manufacturing is. It's science, technology, engineering, and math. You're building things. You're building stuff, right? Why we can't be introducing that at the K? They're doing it actually in New Brunswick. Has just started a COA. They're doing a center of excellence. Excellence in manufacturing is provided resources to that, and we're starting it at the K to 12. Building, just get them in front of some Lego, get them in front of some stuff. Let's start working that way. Used to building things, get that creativity working. Yeah. Other questions?
Hi. I guess my question is more around, there's been a lot of talk about, how to address tariffs and all these things, but I haven't heard a lot of talk about the downstream effect of the small business. You look like a place like the Fraser Valley, Chilliwack, a lot of really small businesses that can't make or are holding back on making needed upgrades on certain things because of so much uncertainty. So I guess the question is what hope or what advice or whatever can we give to those guys that are just, they got 2-3 employees, or they're struggling already to make ends meet. They've got stuff they got to do, but now all this is piled on top. They're still recovering from the COVID effect, on and on and on. There just seems to be so many strikes against the average small business guy. So what hope or what advice with all this fear and talk about tariffs can we offer those guys?
And I think I'd go back to what I previously said, which is we don't know what to do macro, but there are small things that we could do in our business. And I think you got to break your business down into small bite-sized chunks, right to how do you buy stuff? Who do you buy the stuff from? Where are you sourcing it from? How am I selling it? What do my terms and conditions look like? I think you have to break your business down into small bite-sized pieces, because for me personally, if I looked at my own business right now with what we're going through in tariffs, I'm not even going to come into work. I'm not going to get out of bed. So I had to break it down into small pieces and then kind of deal with each thing on a smaller, more mentally easier size to deal with.
Yeah, Julian?
Sometimes just taking it one day at a time. Wake up in the morning, I go, what can I deal with today? And what can I accomplish today that I know I can get done? And the big picture sometimes just has to wait until things are more concrete.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
Yeah, I think for small business, I referenced the large corporations that I had talked to last week and their scenario planning. I think they're on a small business level, you're absolutely going to have to do that, as Alan alluded to. You have to plan and prepare as best you can. So be nimble and have options as much as you can. Yeah, on a micro level, I think you need to do that. The other thing I think we've talked about it quite a bit up here too is these tariffs are going to be inflationary in the market. On a small business level, I would say you're not competing against anybody that's likely not impacted. So when it comes to you're afraid to raise your prices in order to compensate for the extra costs that these tariffs are causing your business, I would say just cross that bridge, because everybody will at some point.
I'd add one final thing, which is sometimes I say to myself, don't do anything until you have to do something. So the tariff talk over the last 3 months has changed 15 times, and my friendly competitors, some of them panicked, and they were shipping stuff here, shipping it there, taking it across the border, not across the border, doing this, doing that. And I didn't do anything. I just left it in the yard. And it changed a few times, and we were able to get some things across the border at that point in time. For me, I have a yard full of equipment, so my don't do anything until I have to do something is coming really soon.
I'm trying to think. Is that Steve? Yeah. Hey, how's it going? So, Steve, there's I think part of it too is how it's affecting. And you hinted at how it's affecting just the sentiment, consumer sentiment. Uncertainty is just weighing down on everybody. And I think part of this is it is looking at your local chambers of commerce, your boards of trade. It's trying to provide, as best you can, some specific feedback of how it's affecting you, because it is affecting different businesses in so many different ways. And I think, for you, it might be, you might be looking at other opportunities. You might be doubling down on the fact that you're a longstanding local business, and you've been doing it and helping people get through. There's a multiplier effect on when it affects big, huge companies. It trickles down and starts to affect all the people that supply goods and services to them as well. And I'm not sure that that's hitting as profoundly as it will, but I think it's all been good feedback. I like the idea of the don't panic right away. Use the resources you can. If you don't know, ask. Start with the chamber. We're not going to know everything, but what we're going to do is we're going to try and navigate. I think that's what you're seeing. There's a willingness to say, yes, we don't have a ready answer now, but we're going to look for something. We're going to get back to you, and we'll get out there and try and find it, try and find some information. So it may be Export Navigator. It may be, if you're looking at financing, as BDC, or maybe there's programs and grant opportunities that are coming from the government with counter tariff stuff. That too is going to come and change and shift as well. But I think just especially in Chilliwack, it's got such a tight-knit community of folks and a real willingness from the organizations. SEPCO is represented here that want to step up and help and assist too.
I don't know, a bold move. I will test it by running it by 2 or 3 trusted peers that I know, and it might come back that that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Okay, we'll take that off the table. But a lot of times it just confirms, and even if it ends up being a decision that takes you where you didn't want to go, at least you can go back and go, I made that decision with a trusted group of
Right.
peers that. And whether that's with people in the chamber, heck, I'll take a call from anyone. If someone needs, I just think it's good to test your ideas or your thoughts with your peers.
Yeah.
Yeah, reach out to your community. Like, reach out to other businesses in the same sector as you, or your industry organizations, things like that. They may have ideas that you haven't thought of. Example was, I was at a cheese festival this past weekend, and I was talking to another cheese producer. They also use glass bottles, and our glass bottle supplier has already said there's going to be tariffs on the bottles that they're bringing from the States. They work on both sides of the border. So they were already looking into Canadian suppliers for glass bottles, and if they would work in our bottling machines and things like that. So if someone has already done that work for you, and you can collaborate with them or work together with them, you may find some new opportunities that way to diversify or change your course.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I agree. Talk to other people and other businesses. It's not always the same template answer that you'll get from somebody else that can apply directly to your business. But boy, the ideas. If you're maybe not an overly creative person like myself, boy, you can get ideas from other people. And I've seen that. In terms of, you mentioned glass bottles. Maybe it's other pieces that are integral to your business that you're importing from the States, where there actually are good local options or international options in other fields. And I think, all business is going to be affected. You will have to do some work if these tariffs remain in place to respond and diversify if need be. But I think you can be proactive, and a big way to do that is don't be alone in it and talk to people.
Yeah. No, I would say, I guess, to put my excellence in manufacturing hat on, we have a program, so decades-old program called the Members Need Help program. It was designed as a member-to-member peer sharing kind of a Q&A where it was, hey, I'm putting in policy around X, Y, Z. Has anyone else ever done something like this? Right now, a lot of talk about customs brokers, a lot of talk about just what Julian was saying. I'm looking for a source of, whether it's aluminum cans or glass bottles or, gears and widgets, And one thing that EMC has done is we've opened that up, and we've made that open to everyone, not just members. So yeah, I can provide some additional information. The chamber has our resources as well, and that's sector specific with manufacturing. But as we've kind of discussed up here, it touches it touches a lot of different aspects, and I'm sure if we don't have it, it's an opportunity to ask that question and open it up to 18,000 plus engaged businesses across Canada, that chances are somebody's had those similar challenges. Yeah. Any other questions? Just check in.
Hi. So obviously today we've had the opportunity to talk about a lot of the difficulties, troubles, and concerns with the changes. But within my industry, we're a little sheltered in some of it. We're fortunate in that regard because we can just be pretty tactical and repositioning ourselves. And one of the things that I've noticed, or I guess, is are there any areas of opportunity that you see in all these changes within my industry again? Oftentimes during periods of volatility or negative, market returns, things like that, is when the people who are the best, quite frankly, reposition themselves and really set themselves apart. Are there any areas you feel in your industry that are kind of the same, that you think, okay, it might not make the next 6 months easier, but 2-4 years from now, the difference between me and my closest competitor is going to be a pretty wide margin now?
Who wants to try that one?
Oh. So for us, we primarily build commercial trailers, and we purchase, process a lot of aluminum, and so part of our diversification on our journey has been building this equipment for the United States, which now got hammered over here. But the way we'd approached it is we build these trailers, but is that what we do? Or is really what we do is we buy a large amount of aluminum, process it, and weld it together. That's actually what we do that's really good. So that's what we took to the market, and that's how we got this, contract to do all the stuff that we're doing now. We just need to do that again. So I think if you get hung up in what you make or build or sell, I think that's going to be hard. I think you have to take a look at what do you actually do at your core competencies that are actually really good. You may have to reinvent yourself a little bit, which we're probably going to have to do.
Chris?
Sure, yeah. I think some of this was kind of latent in the background in our business in terms of the price of American goods compared to imported goods from either Europe or Asia. And so if there's tariffs applied for the long term on American goods, we will, you have to diversify your supply chain. But it's led to some pretty interesting conversations with key vendors about creative ways. So even American companies saying, hey, can we bypass the US? Can we do some element of manufacturing or assembly in Canada? Could you partner with us to do it? And so I think long term, if with or without tariffs, I think it's certainly opening up opportunities for things like that. I mean, essentially, a lot of the American manufacturers are doing that anyway. It's components from around the world that are assembled in the USA, often with USA flag draped all over it. And so, can we do the same thing in Canada? The tariffs might provide an opportunity to make that viable compared to, a bit of a question all the time of whether we could really actually do that in Canada in the long term.
Yeah. Julian?
We're planning to lean heavily into the buy local, buy Canadian, and that's what we're already been doing. If this sentiment continues long term, that's great, but if it doesn't, we're hoping to introduce ourselves to many new customers and that they will continue to support us in the long term. It's been a huge opportunity to grow our customer base, and we've really noticed that to the point where we're getting a little worried it might get a bit unmanageable in the short term until we can expand, but it has always been our goal to get to the point where we can expand our processing area to be more efficient, and this actually might be part of the vehicle to do that. So that part of it is kind of exciting and definitely cause for optimism for us that way.
Great. I almost think this is a good time to stop. We just end on an optimistic, but I don't want to miss out questions here. Were there any more? Or we just end on Julian's optimistic view? Hey, I had no problem with that. I think that we're going to call it. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time today. I think it's been a good conversation. I want to thank all the panelists for taking time out of your busy, hectic days. Hopefully nothing. I didn't look at the news or anything. So good. And wasn't that lovely that we didn't? Yeah. So we just had a conversation. So everybody, if you could join me in thanking our panelists. And thank the Chamber for putting this, providing this opportunity. I think is really important and a welcome one. And dare say we'll probably be back to have some more of these conversations.
Yes. I just think I have to pop over here just because we are rolling still. Thank you all for being here. You guys were amazing. Jason, thank you so much for moderating for us today. That's it for today. I do sentiment what Jason said. We might be back talking about something new in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. But have a great day. Thank you all for being here. I know you're busy, so taking your time and to share your expertise or what knowledge you do have in such a volatile situation is incredible. So thank you.
Thank you.